What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the show. Jerry and Rita Alter appeared to be a completely ordinary American couple. However, they turned out to potentially have a very unusual, highly lucrative side hustle. Jerry was a retired public school music teacher. Rita worked as a speech pathologist. They had 2 children who had already safely entered adulthood. All of this is to say, they were very much a normal, middle-class American family, at least from the perspective of their community. In 1977, they departed the endless hustle of New York for a quiet life in Cliff, New Mexico. There, they built a modest ranch-style home on 20 acres of land. Rita quickly found work as a speech therapist in the local public school system, while Jerry, a former band teacher and professional musician, settled comfortably into early retirement. They were known by their immediate neighbors and colleagues as polite, educated people, unremarkable in their daily habits. Friends even described them as not exactly thrill seekers, further underscoring just how normal their existence seemed to outsiders. Despite their seemingly modest fixed income, the Alters managed to travel extensively across the globe. They vacationed frequently during school breaks, ultimately visiting more than 140 different countries. They meticulously documented their journeys in photographs and even authored a published book about their worldwide travels. By the time of their respective deaths, Jerry passing in 2012 and Rita in 2017, the unassuming couple had somehow amassed over $1 million in their savings accounts, but their actual net worth may have been significantly higher than that figure, to say the least. Nothing in their known background ever hinted at criminal behavior. However, this quiet pair would posthumously become the central figures in one of the art world's most astonishing unsolved mysteries. On the morning of November 29, 1985, the day immediately following Thanksgiving, a daring art heist rapidly unfolded at the University of Arizona Museum of Art in Tucson. Shortly after the building opened to the public around 9 a.m., a man and a woman casually entered the facility. The woman effectively engaged a security guard in conversation on the ground floor. Meanwhile, the man slipped away upstairs to the main gallery. Within minutes, the man carefully sliced a valuable painting completely out of its frame. He rolled it up tightly, concealed it under a heavy garment, and retreated. In just 15 minutes from their initial arrival, the pair confidently walked out of the museum with their stolen prize. The artwork they took was Willem de Kooning's Woman Ochre, a highly valuable piece of abstract expressionist painting. A witness later recalled seeing the thieves speed away from the scene in a red car, but at the time, investigating detectives found very few other leads to follow. There were no usable fingerprints left behind. Furthermore, there was absolutely no security camera footage available in the museum. As a somewhat ironic footnote, the museum administration later decided to use their insurance payout to finally invest in surveillance cameras. Composite sketches based directly on eyewitness descriptions were distributed to the public. They depicted a middle-aged man with curly hair, heavy glasses, and a thick mustache, accompanied by a woman wearing a distinctive scarf and large wire-rimmed glasses. Despite these detailed clues, the case went completely cold. The FBI added Woman Ochre to its premier art crime list, yet years passed without a single break in the mystery. And this was not just a run-of-the-mill painting. The stolen piece was estimated to be worth up to $150 million in today's currency. For over 3 decades, the fate of the painting remained utterly unknown. The audacious thieves and the priceless canvas had simply vanished into thin air. The mystery of the missing de Kooning took a highly dramatic turn in August 2017. Following Rita Alter's death that summer, the couple's estate was quickly liquidated by their 2 sons. An antique and furniture dealer operating in Silver City, New Mexico, purchased the entire household contents for roughly $2,000. While actively clearing out the Alters' remote home in Cliff, store co-owner David Van Acker noticed an unusually large, framed painting hanging behind the master bedroom door. The artwork was strategically positioned so that it would be completely hidden from view whenever the door was fully open. Furthermore, a homemade wooden doorstop physically prevented the door from swinging wide enough to strike the canvas. The painting itself was dirty, heavily cracked, and covered in thick dust and cobwebs. This heavily suggested it had hung in that concealed spot undisturbed for many years. Van Acker and his business partners brought the painting back to their shop. Their visiting artists and knowledgeable customers immediately remarked that the piece looked exactly like an authentic de Kooning. Suspicious that it could actually be the long-lost Woman Ochre, Van Acker quickly contacted the museum administration in Arizona. In a stunning public revelation, art experts and museum officials conclusively confirmed that the canvas was indeed the original Woman Ochre, the exact piece stolen on that November day in 1985. The rediscovered masterpiece was promptly turned over to authorities, restored, and eventually returned to public display at the University of Arizona Museum of Art. With the painting officially found in Jerry and Rita Alter's possession, the focus of the investigation sharply turned to whether this quiet, unassuming couple could have been the actual thieves. Investigators and journalists soon unearthed several highly compelling clues. One primary piece of circumstantial evidence was a photograph taken at a family Thanksgiving gathering in Tucson. The date on the photo was November 28, 1985, the exact day before the heist occurred. In the photo, Jerry and Rita Alter are clearly seen smiling at a dinner table with relatives, placing them squarely in the same city as the museum just hours before the robbery. According to some analysts, the original police composite sketches of the suspects, when compared in hindsight, bore a notable resemblance to the couple's facial features. The sketch of the woman aligns strikingly well with Rita Alter's appearance at the time. The sketch of the male suspect doesn't immediately resemble Jerry's natural look, but investigators theorize he may have been wearing a fake mustache and perhaps a wig as a disguise. The man in the police sketch also appeared to have a dark tan. Given that the family picture from the day prior shows Jerry without one, this lowers the likelihood of a perfect match, though theatrical makeup remains a strong possibility. Other coincidences continually raised eyebrows during the retrospective investigation. According to the Alter's nephew, Ron Rosenman, the couple had a distinct habit of purchasing red vehicles. In fact, almost every single car they ever owned was painted red. This specific detail bolstered the suspicion that the Alters could have been the elusive pair who fled the museum in a red getaway car. Moreover, the bizarre way woman ochre was hidden inside their home heavily indicated a conscious desire to keep it a secret. Van Auker explicitly noted that when he removed the painting from behind the bedroom door, its outline was clearly visible on the wall behind it. This meant it had hung in that exact spot for an incredibly long time. He later publicly stated his belief that it had been hiding there since the day it was stolen. Indeed, the couple never displayed the painting openly to any house guests. One of the most startling clues actually came from Jerry Alter's own published writing. In 2011, Jerry self-published a small book of short stories titled The Cup and the Lip: Exotic Tales. In one specific story, titled Eye of the Jaguar, a grandmother and granddaughter cleverly team up to visit a local museum. They intentionally distract a security guard and seamlessly steal the museum's prized jewel. Instead of selling this stolen item, a massive 120-carat emerald, they hide it away behind a secret wall panel, making a solemn promise that only their eyes will ever see it. The fictional thieves in the tale leave absolutely no evidence behind. The direct parallels to the woman ochre heist are completely unmistakable. The distraction of a lone guard, the prized object taken without a trace, a secretive hiding spot designated purely for the culprit's private enjoyment. It strongly appears Jerry may have arrogantly memorialized the very crime he and his wife were suspected of committing. Despite all of these compelling clues, there is no direct physical proof conclusively tying the Alters to the actual theft. No latent fingerprints, no positive eyewitness identification. By the time woman ochre was finally recovered, Jerry and Rita were both deceased. Thus, they were never interrogated, arrested, or formally charged with the crime. Their two adult children have not provided any information that sheds light on how their parents came to possess the stolen painting, consistently maintaining they didn't even know it was behind the door until 2017. Officially, the criminal case remains completely unsolved, but virtually all circumstantial evidence firmly points toward Jerry and Rita Alter as the likely culprits who successfully pulled off the legendary heist. The major question still hanging over this case is obvious. Why did they do it at all? One theory, largely favored by their surviving friends and family, is that the Alters might have simply acquired the painting through unconventional means, but not by direct theft. Ron Rosenman, their nephew, publicly wondered if his aunt and uncle could have purchased the de Kooning on the black market, or perhaps unknowingly bought it from the real thieves. He theorized a scenario where the couple were discreetly approached at a local art show by someone offering the painting for cheap, and the Alters simply couldn't resist the incredible bargain. This particular theory sounds very much like the rationalization of an individual struggling to accept that their relatives orchestrated a massive felony. Notably, the couple never once attempted to sell the painting or profit from it in any way, even though it was immensely valuable. This single fact has led many behavioral experts to speculate that Jerry and Rita stole purely for the adrenaline thrill, or perhaps out of an obsessive love of art, rather than for financial gain. Adding significantly to the intrigue, in 2023 and 2024, federal investigators began aggressively probing whether the Alters were involved in other historic art thefts. During the exact same year that woman ochre was stolen, 2 other valuable paintings went missing from the Harwood Museum of Art in Taos, New Mexico during a March 1985 burglary. The FBI has officially joined the active investigation into these unsolved thefts, deeply suspecting Jerry and Rita Alter may have been directly responsible for those as well. If this proves true, it would mean the quiet couple actually pulled off multiple, highly successful art heists in 1985, perhaps utilizing similar methods of calculated distraction and stealth. This has led to widespread conjecture that the couple's secret life as professional art thieves might have extended far beyond the single de Kooning case. However, no other stolen artworks have been definitively linked to their estate to date. The sheer audacity of the suspected crimes continues to fascinate the public, presenting a portrait of a highly synchronized, incredibly secretive partnership. The tragic death of Christine de Serra, a young Filipino flight attendant, continues to be a massive subject of public intrigue and intense controversy. She was found deceased on the very morning of January 1st, 2021, located at the City Garden Grand Hotel in Makati, situated in the Philippines. Security camera footage captured from the hotel in the hours right before her passing placed her actively at the scene. Her highly publicized case has sparked heated nationwide debates over the local investigation's exact direction, the highly questionable handling of forensic evidence, and the deeply conflicting narratives regarding her actual cause of death. Christine was 23 years old when she originally checked into the City Garden Grand Hotel on New Year's Eve 2020. She had specifically asked her mother for permission to join a large celebration with her coworkers, a seemingly innocent decision that would soon turn entirely tragic. After spending several hours socializing at the hotel, Christine was rushed to the Makati Medical Center early on January 1st, 2021. There, she was formally declared dead on arrival by medical staff. Surveillance footage captured fleeting moments from her final hours, clearly showing her in the company of several friends and acquaintances mingling in the hotel lobby and its corridors. Shortly after noon, her lifeless body was formally discovered inside the bathtub of room 2207, presenting with noticeable dark bruises and several signs of possible physical abuse. Initial police reports quickly described the incident as a highly violent SA slaying. This hasty conclusion led to rapid charges being filed against 11 men who were documented as present at the hotel party. According to these early police statements, there were very strong indications that Christine had been brutally assaulted, including alarming reports of deep bruises, lacerations, and biological material allegedly recovered from the scene. However, the subsequent official autopsy, completely conducted by Police Major Michael Nick Sarmiento, surprisingly revealed that Christine de Serra died strictly from a ruptured aortic aneurysm, which is classified as a natural cause of death. The official autopsy did note various lacerations on her thighs, multiple contusions on her knees, and several scratches, which severely complicated the clinical picture. These strange physical findings raised massive questions about whether the noted injuries resulted from a violent altercation, or if they were simply incidental to her underlying medical condition. The deeply conflicting evidence found in the initial autopsy, combined with the family's own severe doubts, spurred a demand for a second autopsy, the specific details of which remained highly confidential. The case quickly evolved into a massive, highly public battle of competing narratives. On one side, the Philippine National Police firmly maintained that Christine's death was entirely natural. They constantly cited the first autopsy report that strongly pointed to an aortic aneurysm as the sole cause of death. On the other side, the victim's family and several vocal critics angrily argued that the glaring physical evidence strongly pointed to possible, covered-up foul play. Furthermore, the specific way in which the initial investigation was conducted has also drawn considerable widespread criticism. The PNP's rapid decision to initially label the complex case as fully solved after hastily identifying a group of suspects who were all later released due to totally insufficient evidence has been widely denounced by legal experts as dangerously premature. Critics argue that the intense rush to judgment not only unfairly tarnished the public reputations of the individuals involved, but it also left massive, unanswered questions regarding the proper clinical handling of forensic evidence at the scene. In particular, the shocking decision to fully embalm Christine's body before a completely comprehensive forensic examination could occur has been heavily criticized by medical professionals. They correctly note that this drastic action may have completely compromised the secure collection of crucial, potentially case-solving biological evidence. What actually happened to Christine still remains a deep, tragic mystery, with her haunting final images revealing incredibly little about what actually transpired in that hotel room on that fateful night. The internet, well, it has a assisted habit of giving forgotten mysteries a second life. Though this is especially true when those mysteries revolve around a truly disturbing piece of media. Someone unearths an eerie or perhaps entirely horrific recording from the past. Then that footage gets copied, mirrored, re-uploaded dozens of times across various platforms. Netizens and amateur detectives begin dissecting every single frame, looking for hidden details. And yet, despite millions of individuals analyzing the footage to absolute exhaustion, nobody ever uncovers the actual truth behind the events. One of the most unsettling examples of this phenomenon is a grainy VHS tape. It dates back to the mid-1980s and centers on a martial arts instructor named Bobby Joe Blythe. Blythe was a former Marine, well known for a highly abrasive personality. He openly claimed to have enjoyed taking lives during his military service. He also constantly boasted that many of his students served as bodyguards and local police officers, basically implying a level of untouchability. Rumors circulated that he would deliberately lure transients into his training center just so his advanced black belts could inflict severe beatings upon them. Aside from martial arts, Blythe instructed people in the use of firearms. He actually drew immense public criticism after staging a fatal shooting scenario in front of a group of children, loudly challenging them with the phrase,
"If you're so good at karate, so good, you stop this!"
But as bizarre as that particular event was, it has largely been overshadowed by the tape in question. The recording surfaced online in 2009, bearing the title, "Jesus Taught Me."
This guy, like I say, he's a priest. He's a 10th degree red belt. And who'd you say promoted you to 10th degree red belt? Jesus did. Okay. And I know every one of us would like to be taught by someone that has been taught by Jesus. Correct, John? Absolutely. Because I guarantee you, that's got to be some movements to behold, right?
Well, I won't brag or anything of that nature, but
Video starts off in an almost comical manner. A homeless gentleman wanders into Blythe Street Mall Dojo in Dumfries, Virginia, claiming that the Lord had personally taught him martial arts. Because his true identity has never been established by authorities, online communities have since dubbed this man KFG, or Kung Fu Guy. Bobby Joe Blythe sarcastically introduces the supposed martial arts master. He then actively encourages him to showcase his skills on one of his students, a black belt named Willie J. Dennis. It is immediately clear that KFG does not want to physically spar with Dennis. In fact, he explicitly states that he only wants to demonstrate his moves around the student rather than directly engage with him. At one point, he even clearly says,
I just wish to teach you. I don't wish to hurt you. Teach me.
With that sudden exclamation, Dennis strikes out at the man. KFG immediately counters the aggression with some energetic kicks and punches of his own, firmly stating, "Don't do that anymore." But Dennis does not back down.
No, just don't do that. Good. I'm not a fighter.
As the sparring continues, Dennis actually slips on the mat and completely fails to land a sweeping kick. And though his opponent's movements are highly theatrical, to an untrained observer, it actually appears that KFG is the more skilled fighter in the room. Perhaps feeling like he had deeply embarrassed himself in front of his peers and his instructor, Dennis gives up on formal technique. He turns the martial arts demonstration into a brutal street brawl. He violently grabs KFG, punches him square in the face, and then tosses him to the ground while shouting an expletive. Dennis continues to relentlessly strike KFG. The older man manages to get back on his feet, repeatedly saying that he does not want to fight anymore. What follows is incredibly difficult to document. Rather than halting the aggression, Dennis continues attacking KFG, landing a massive hit that knocks him directly to the ground. Unable to control his volatile emotions, Dennis then knees KFG in the head. This blow knocks the man into a solid metal pole, instantly rendering him unconscious. Dennis then proceeds to stomp on the unconscious man's head repeatedly. Warily, when the brutal onslaught finally ends, KFG can be heard drawing labored, guttural breaths, which sounds exactly like a person struggling with a severely obstructed airway. According to medically trained professionals who have analyzed the audio of the footage, that specific breathing pattern is highly consistent with a severe traumatic brain injury. Throughout all of this chaos, Bobby Joe Blythe makes absolutely no attempt to intervene. Instead, he simply orders his students to drag KFG out the back door. The camera lens then lingers on a thick trail of blood leading out of the building. Blythe provides a chilling narration over the scene. What we have here is the trail of the Kung Fu master as he is departing my dojo, just taken on 13 December 1984, about 7 p.m.
What we have here is the trail of the Kung Fu master as he is departing my dojo. Just taken on 13 December 1984, about 7 p.m.
The video ends not with a rational explanation of what happened to the unconscious victim, but rather on a worryingly large red smear left on the rear exit door. For 25 long years, that specific tape gathered dust in Bobby Joe Blythe's private collection. In fact, it only came to light in 2009 because Blythe, for reasons known only to himself, decided to digitize the recording and upload it to his personal YouTube channel under the handle Bobby Joe Blythe 007. In the comment section of the upload, many viewers harshly criticized the black belt, Dennis. Blythe himself even responded to the backlash, callously stating, "If it would have took longer, I would have dropped them both. I was very disappointed with my guy and he paid for a week after that." But other viewers were vastly more concerned for KFG. His sustained injuries looked, and frankly sounded, completely catastrophic. People naturally assumed the absolute worst outcome. As public criticism grew rapidly, Blythe updated the video's description text. He claimed that the injured man was merely a local nuisance who frequently stole pizza. He wrote that the man apparently had the beating coming, and added that he had simply left him in a commercial dumpster for the local police to pick up. Because it was not at all clear whether KFG was ever found alive or deceased, the viral video was ultimately forwarded to law enforcement agencies. Quietly, dedicated investigators began examining whether the tape might actually depict an unsolved, unreported homicide. Many professionals, including Hampton Police Chief Carlos Smithers, strongly believed it did.
Having seen him get stomped, his head stomped as many times as he did, I would be surprised that he survived it or did not at least have major brain damage.
Though the original video itself was eventually removed by YouTube for its graphic content, the public interest in solving the case never faded away. Internet sleuths began obsessively trying to identify the homeless man to determine his final fate. Dedicated web pages even popped up to help crowdsource the mystery. Perhaps the largest online group, known as Justice for Kung Fu Guy, produced a detailed series of enhanced screenshots highlighting the victim's face. After digging relentlessly through historical missing persons reports, they discovered one involving a man named Richard Ricardo Dyer. He did physically resemble KFG. The issue with this theory, however, is that Dyer did not officially disappear until January 1987. That is around 2 years after the dojo incident was supposedly filmed, assuming, of course, that Blythe provided the correct date in the tape's narration. All in all, it seems highly unlikely that Richard Dyer was the Kung Fu guy. Other than a passing facial resemblance, there is nothing concrete to suggest a match. The only known piece of evidence that hints at the true fate of KFG is the verbal testimony of a local law enforcement officer. A retired Prince William County detective named Chuck Feldbush publicly claimed that he actually knew both Bobby Joe Blythe and the victim. According to his recollection, the homeless man, whose legal name he could not remember, was a local vagrant who lived out in the woods near the martial arts studio. He was occasionally arrested for minor nuisance offenses, such as stealing pizza from local restaurants. The detective explicitly stated that he encountered the man several days after the filmed assault. He noted the man was limping badly, clearly having been beaten up, but he was apparently still alive. The detective also claimed that the injured man actively refused to pursue any criminal charges regarding the incident. No official police records have ever surfaced publicly confirming that officer's specific account, meaning to this day, KFG's true identity and ultimate fate haven't been established beyond Feldbush's unverified recollection. Even if the detective's statement is to be taken as fact, it certainly doesn't rule out the possibility that the victim passed away from internal injuries in the subsequent days or weeks following the encounter. As for Bobby Joe Blythe himself, a separate candid video would later surface online. In it, he can be heard casually lecturing his students about how he maintains strong police contacts and can basically get away with anything inside his studio.
We don't tolerate bullshit from nobody in our domain. We black belts, this is our place. We can do what we want anytime we feel like it, and feel free as anybody could be in this world.
Now, he could have just been lying to impress his younger students, or he could have been telling the absolute truth about his local influence. What remains certain is that Blythe and his students never faced any criminal charges in connection with the Kung Fu Guy incident, despite the fact that the entire brutal assault was caught on camera. This glaring lack of accountability has led some researchers to strongly suspect a police cover-up. The theory suggests the sensei was protected by the very small-town cops he had previously helped train. Indeed, some analysts find it incredibly coincidental that the only specific offenses Officer Feldbush recalled KFG being guilty of, such as taking food off people's plates at a local Pizza Hut, just so happened to be the exact same accusations Blythe listed in his YouTube video description. And today, more than 40 years after the violent incident was filmed, the most basic, fundamental questions about the tape remain completely unanswered. Who was KFG? What happened to him after he was dragged out of the dojo? Did he actually survive his injuries, or did one of the internet's earliest viral crime videos capture an unsolved homicide? Nobody has ever produced a definitive answer to these questions. Because the victim's identity has never been publicly confirmed, it is entirely possible that the only individuals who know what really happened have simply chosen to remain silent all these years. In October 1980, 47-year-old Cynthia Jabbour completely vanished while living in Las Vegas. Over the ensuing years, her cold case was aggressively linked to several other high-profile missing persons investigations. The sprawling narrative eventually culminated in a landmark slaying conviction, despite the absolute lack of a recovered body. Cynthia Jabbour was last seen alive around 10:30 p.m. on October 5th, 1980. She was standing in the lobby of her boyfriend's Las Vegas condominium building. She had explicitly told several close friends that she intended to permanently end her relationship with him that very night. Her given reason was his increasingly jealous and deeply possessive behavior. When Jabbour unexpectedly failed to return to her own home, concerned friends checked her apartment 2 days later and found absolutely no trace of her presence. No personal belongings were missing from the residence. Soon after the search began, Jabbour's personal vehicle turned up abandoned in a massive parking lot outside the Caesars Palace Hotel. Furthermore, she had left behind roughly $47,000 in various financial investments, assets that she presumably would not have abandoned voluntarily under normal circumstances. From the very outset of the investigation, these glaring signs heavily pointed to foul play, rather than a voluntary, planned disappearance. Police detectives quickly focused their attention on Jabbour's boyfriend, Robert Weeks, viewing him as the prime suspect in the case. When formally questioned, Weeks casually claimed she had simply canceled their evening dinner plans, stating he had absolutely no idea where she went afterward. Investigators were immediately skeptical of his unverified story. Weeks initially agreed to undergo a polygraph test to clear his name, but then abruptly backed out at the last minute, bizarrely claiming he suddenly had to leave town for business. Within a single month of Jabbour's disappearance, Weeks completely fled the country, traveling first to Mexico and then eventually relocating to Chile. His sudden, unannounced flight greatly heightened law enforcement's suspicion of his direct involvement in her presumed death. However, with their main suspect gone and absolutely no physical evidence recovered, the case essentially went cold for years. Despite the standstill, Weeks remained the primary focus of investigators' lingering suspicions. Notably, exactly 3 years later, Weeks brazenly re-entered the United States. He utilized a forged Libyan passport, officially issued under the fake name of Robert Smith. Somehow, this glaring border anomaly didn't set off any immediate security alarms. He was able to easily resettle and seamlessly resume his life in the States, openly living as a Libyan national named Robert Smith. Somehow, this particular detail remains one of the most absurd aspects of the entire timeline. A major investigative break finally occurred in 1986 when another woman intimately involved in Weeks's life vanished in a strikingly similar manner. On April 5, 1986, one of Weeks's new girlfriends, a woman named Carolyn Riley, disappeared in San Diego. She vanished on the exact night she allegedly intended to break up with him. Her car was later found abandoned at a local hotel, perfectly mirroring the exact circumstances of Jabour's case. This alarming coincidence prompted detectives to dig much deeper into Weeks's hidden past. They quickly discovered a highly disturbing behavioral pattern that extended far beyond Cynthia Jabbour. Robert's ex-wife Patricia had vanished in Las Vegas back in April 1968, shortly after their bitter divorce was finalized. Her car was found completely abandoned. At the time, Weeks claimed she had suffered a severe nervous breakdown and simply fled the state. Unsurprisingly, she was never seen or heard from again by anyone. Additionally, Weeks's former business associate, a man named Jim Shaw, went missing in May 1971, immediately following a heated public argument with him. To Hartsa, Shaw's vehicle was later found abandoned, and forensic teams discovered significant signs of extreme violence inside the cabin. With all 4 distinct cases spanning 18 years firmly linked to Robert Weeks, investigators logically concluded they were dealing with a highly dangerous single perpetrator. In 1987, the massive investigation received vital nationwide exposure when the complicated case was profiled on national television. In May 1987, a viewer tip successfully led police to a residence in Tucson, Arizona, where Weeks was quietly living under an alias. He was promptly arrested by local authorities on an unrelated fraud charge. This tactical arrest safely allowed authorities to hold him in custody while they meticulously built their big slaying case. Weeks was soon extradited back to Nevada, and shortly after his arrival, he was formally indicted for the slayings of both Cynthia Jabbour and his ex-wife, Patricia. He was heavily suspected in the Riley and Shaw cases as well, though prosecutors ultimately found that there was currently insufficient physical evidence to officially charge him for those crimes. Robert Weeks went on trial in Las Vegas during April 1988. State prosecutors fiercely argued that Weeks was a deeply possessive, highly violent man who would resort to absolutely anything to permanently prevent the women in his life from leaving him. Multiple witnesses testified under oath about his extreme jealousy and heavily abusive behavior, emphasizing repeatedly that neither Cynthia nor Patricia would have ever left their established lives behind voluntarily. One of the most incredibly incriminating pieces of evidence presented to the jury was Weeks's own personal diary. In one specific entry, he angrily wrote that Cynthia had humiliated him beyond belief. He then explicitly vowed in ink to even the score. Such written admissions provided the prosecution with the exact leverage they needed. Somewhat controversially regarding legal procedure, the circumstantial evidence related to Carol Riley and Jim Shaw was also allowed to be formally entered into evidence during the trial, despite Weeks not being officially charged in relation to those specific disappearances. Ultimately, Weeks was found guilty by the jury of first-degree slayings in both Cynthia's and Patricia's cases. In April 1988, a judge sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Notably, it marked the very first time in Nevada legal history that a conviction of such magnitude was successfully achieved without a victim's physical body being presented as evidence. Even long after his historic conviction, Robert Weeks never once revealed what truly became of Cynthia Jabbour or the other missing individuals. None of the 4 victims' physical remains have ever been recovered by search teams. Investigators heavily suspect that Weeks hid the bodies deep in remote abandoned desert mine shafts, which would perfectly explain the total lack of physical evidence recovered over the decades. Weeks ultimately took the dark secret of his victims' deaths to the grave with him, permanently denying the grieving families the ultimate closure they so desperately sought. Paula Abdul is a highly successful American singer, choreographer, and television personality. She originally rose to massive fame in the late 1980s with a long string of chart-topping pop hits. In 1991, she began her highly anticipated worldwide Under My Spell tour. The massive production lasted until the very end of 1992. 2 years later, however, she made a truly startling public claim. She stated that in 1992, she had narrowly survived a horrific plane crash during that very tour. This alleged event left her seriously injured and forcibly sidelined her from performing on stage for an extended, multi-year period. Abdul has graphically described undergoing 15 separate spinal surgeries as a direct result of the crash, stating the traumatic incident entirely derailed her thriving career for 7 long years. Paula Abdul has publicly recounted the harrowing plane crash story on multiple television occasions, frequently providing vivid, terrifying details of the incident and its brutal aftermath. According to her very earliest accounts, the crash occurred in 1992 while she was privately traveling between scheduled concert stops on a small plane. She explicitly stated, "It all happened when I boarded a 7-seater plane, and an hour into the flight, one of the engines blew up and the right wing caught fire and everything went black." The very next thing she remembered, she claimed to interviewers, was waking up in a hospital bed. "I woke up in the hospital only to find that I had crushed my cervical spine, leaving me partially paralyzed." Abdul says the terrifying crash left her with severe physical injuries that required extensive, ongoing medical intervention. During her lengthy recovery process, she experienced chronic, debilitating pain and highly limited mobility. The famous singer has often emphasized how the horrific incident abruptly halted her massive career momentum at its absolute peak. She has frequently indicated that because of the fiery crash and the ensuing health struggles, she had to step away from performing entirely for several years. In fact, Abdul often quantifies the hiatus at about 7 full years of professional downtime before she could finally return to work. This timeline would roughly correspond to the period stretching from the early 1990s until the early 2000s, just before her massive reemergence in the public eye as a judge on the hit show American Idol. While Abdul's story is undeniably compelling and tragic, numerous factual inconsistencies and glaring gaps in physical evidence have led many observers to deeply question its overall authenticity. There are several significant key issues that strongly cast doubt on her plane crash claim. According to investigators and skeptics, deep dives into the claim have turned up absolutely no official government record of any plane crash occurring in 1992 or 1993 that matches Paula Abdul's vivid description. The U.S. National Transportation Safety Board, which meticulously logs all aviation accidents, has absolutely no record of a crash involving Abdul, nor does the agency have any record of a small plane incident occurring on the specific dates and locations she has frequently mentioned. Additionally, no contemporaneous news reports or media coverage can be found anywhere documenting such a massive event, even though a celebrity plane crash of that magnitude would be fully expected to make global headlines instantly. Furthermore, skeptics strongly argue that even if the physical crash site could have been kept off official flight records, the sudden attendance of a major A-list celebrity at a public hospital for a fiery plane crash would have inevitably led to massive leaks to the tabloid press. According to skeptics, this absolute absence of evidence is a highly significant red flag. Another massive issue arises from potentially inconsistent claims about the crash timeline that she has made over the years. Abdul's own public statements about exactly when the crash happened have varied significantly over time, directly leading to deep confusion about the actual timeline. In some interviews, she has explicitly referred to the crash occurring in 1992 during the Under My Spell tour. Yet, in other interviews, she has strongly implied it happened in 1993, well after the tour's official end. This discrepancy is highly problematic because Abdul's massive world tour officially concluded in 1992. And she definitively wasn't touring in 1993. This is a problem, according to skeptics, because from her very earliest accounts, the alleged plane trip specifically took place while she was actively on tour. For example, Abdul once firmly stated the accident happened exactly on her birthday in June 1993, even though by that specific time, her tour had long since ended. Given the highly dramatic nature of the claim, one would logically expect other people to have been directly involved and to openly remember the terrifying event. Abdul specifically described being on a 7-seater plane. Presumably, there was a pilot, possibly a co-pilot, and other passengers or crew members present on board. To date, absolutely no pilot or fellow passenger has ever come forward publicly to corroborate Abdul's harrowing story. There are no known eyewitness accounts from any airport personnel, emergency medical responders, or flight crew that support the occurrence of a fiery emergency landing or crash involving Abdul. A small plane making an emergency crash landing with a massive pop star on board would highly likely have been documented, or at least remembered by others. Yet absolutely no such testimonies exist anywhere in the public record. Another potential contradiction lies deeply in Abdul's own explanations for her chronic bodily injuries. In some narratives, Abdul has actually mentioned two entirely separate accidents occurring in the early 1990s, the alleged plane crash and a separate, confirmed 1992 car accident, as both contributing heavily to her health issues. According to a 2019 interview published in Parade magazine, Abdul experienced two distinct accidents: a 1992 car crash that definitely left her with severe neck injuries, and a 1993 plane crash that allegedly left her partially paralyzed. This directly raises questions about whether the plane crash alone was solely responsible for her medical problems, or if the dramatic story slowly evolved from a combination of different traumatic events over time. According to skeptics, the direct overlap of a very serious car wreck in the exact same time frame might fully explain all of Abdul's physical injuries, completely casting doubt on the absolute need for a separate plane crash incident at all. It remains entirely unclear why Abdul sometimes highly highlights one incident versus the other, and the ongoing inconsistency in her varying accounts of what actually caused her spinal damage has heavily fueled public skepticism. To skeptics, all of these glaring contradictions strongly suggest that Abdul's plane crash story simply doesn't add up neatly. Supporters, or highly sympathetic observers of Paula Abdul, actively argue that there are valid reasons, completely aside from intentional deceit, that could easily explain the noted discrepancies in her plane crash story. Surviving a truly catastrophic event, or even simply believing one has, can be incredibly traumatic. The resulting physical and mental trauma can deeply affect long-term memory. Another highly significant possibility is that there was indeed a very real in-flight emergency, or an incredibly hard, terrifying landing that Abdul experienced, but that it wasn't officially classified by aviation authorities as a formal crash. For instance, the plane's pilot might have heroically managed to make a rough emergency landing at a very small airfield or an open, grassy area, without formally notifying federal authorities. Supporters argue that since there were absolutely no fatalities, the terrifying incident could have been handled completely privately, without officially involving the authorities or large insurance companies. In such a specific scenario, the event might not physically appear in official government records if it simply wasn't reported as an accident. Abdul could simply be describing this highly frightening close call as a crash, in layman's terms. Some analysts have speculated that perhaps the small plane did actually encounter severe mechanical trouble in the air, exactly like the engine fire she vividly described. They suggest the pilot had to land abruptly and violently, giving Abdul the distinct impression of having narrowly survived a crash, even if the official NTSB criteria weren't legally met. Notably, people can and do suffer from highly significant injuries in very hard aircraft landings, which may perfectly explain why she sustained such severe trauma to her neck and backs. This would still constitute a terrifying incident that caused lifelong physical trauma, just not one that left the specific kind of public bureaucratic trace investigators would normally expect. Furthermore, supporters rightly point out that she undoubtedly suffers from severe chronic pain issues, which undeniably did derail her massive career at its absolute height. For now, the absolute truth of the matter remains completely unknown. Both skeptics and devoted supporters continue to raise compelling, interesting points regarding the events of that era, leaving the final conclusion open to ongoing historical debate. She was a 26-year-old Belgian mother, originating from Mechelen, a historic city located near Antwerp. She vanished completely in 2010, but shockingly, her disappearance wasn't officially reported to the police for 14 years. She had a highly turbulent early life, enduring a difficult childhood and spending significant time in institutional care. At 18, Heidi firmly cut off all contact with her biological family. She then moved in with her much older boyfriend, relocating to the municipality of Balen. The origins of this relationship were highly unconventional and disturbing, a detail that becomes highly relevant later on in the investigation. By 2008, the couple were actively living together in Balen, managing a household along with their 3 young children, who were then ages 2, 3, and 7. Described by neighbors as leading a very isolated life with incredibly few social contacts, Heidi largely kept to herself. She was not close with others beyond the walls of her immediate household. In mid-2010, Heidi DeShepard disappeared suddenly, doing so without leaving any warning or trace. According to an acquaintance, she simply vanished from one day to the next, taking along all of her personal belongings. Her live-in boyfriend, who was also the biological father of her children and previously acted as her foster parent, later confirmed to authorities that Heidi went missing in 2010. But tellingly, absolutely no one reported her officially missing at the time. Not a single family member, no friends. Not even her long-term partner bothered to contact the police when she vanished. Her ex-boyfriend did casually inform a local social services office that she had supposedly moved away, allegedly doing so just to avoid illegally drawing government benefit checks in Heidi's name for their shared children. But that was the absolute extent of his notifications. As a direct result of this silence, the disappearance went entirely unnoticed by national authorities for years. In fact, official government records even provided the bureaucratic illusion that Heidi had simply moved away to start fresh. The absolute last administrative trace of her existence was the physical collection of a provisional driver's license on May 6, 2010. However, it remains highly unclear if Heidi herself actually picked the document up from the office. That provisional license was never upgraded to a permanent status, and her national identity card subsequently expired in 2011 without any attempt at renewal. By November 2010, an unknown individual had formally informed the local Baylen government that Heidi was no longer residing at her registered address. After a routine administrative check by government officials, her name was officially removed from the population register. Administratively speaking, it was exactly as if Heidi DeShepard had safely moved away or simply ceased to exist entirely. In Belgium, this specific type of bureaucratic deletion meant Heidi's prolonged absence simply didn't raise any legal wrongs. It was only by sheer chance, nearly 14 years later, that the dark truth finally came to light. In late 2023, a standard report generated from the school of one of her children alerted local authorities to a strange anomaly. The mother had been inexplicably absent from all records for a very long time. This red flag eventually triggered a severely belated missing person investigation. Finally, in January 2025, the Belgian Federal Police officially issued a wide public appeal for any information regarding Heidi DeShepard's long-standing disappearance. The bizarre case immediately gripped the nation of Belgium. Media headlines repeatedly asked how a young mother of 3 children could possibly vanish for 14 years without anyone noticing or bothering to report it. Police officials revealed that despite extensive inquiries conducted over the past year, they had found absolutely no trace of Heidi's existence, not in Belgium nor anywhere abroad. Approximately 20 tips have trickled in since the cold case went public, mostly originating from people who knew Heidi vaguely in the past. But so far, absolutely no breakthrough has been achieved by investigators. Public scrutiny quickly centered entirely on Heidi's boyfriend. This was not only because he was presumably the last person to ever see her alive, but because of the highly unusual, deeply unnatural nature of their early relationships. This older man had originally served as Heidi's official foster parent. Some media reports even classify him as her adoptive father, long before their relationship turned romantic in nature. After successfully divorcing his then wife, a woman who had previously served as a primary mother figure to Heidi, he immediately began a relationship with Heidi, who was by then a young adult. According to one investigative source, he explicitly indicated to them, "Heidi was once my foster daughter. After I divorced my wife, I started a relationship with Heidi." Heidi was already pregnant with our first child at the age of 19. This deeply disturbing guardian-turned-boyfriend dynamic has predictably prompted immense shock and public outrage in the local community and across online platforms. Many observers find it extremely difficult to grant the ex-boyfriend the benefit of the doubt, especially given this highly problematic background. The boyfriend has continuously and consistently denied any involvement whatsoever in her sudden disappearance. He firmly insists that Heidi simply left the home of her own free accord. He claims their romantic relationship had deeply deteriorated by 2010, entirely due to Heidi's alleged drug problem. By his specific account, Heidi was heavily struggling with an addiction to meth, which put an unbearable strain on their shared household. It is important to be clear here. This narrative is entirely based on his own account. At present, there are absolutely no public, medical, or arrest records confirming she ever actually had a substance abuse problem. He stated this supposed addiction prompted him to issue a harsh ultimatum: choose between the illegal substances or their children. He says that after he directly confronted her and demanded she seek professional help, events rapidly came to a head in June 2010, right before the start of the summer holidays. He claims Heidi picked up the children from school, dropped them off abruptly with his parents, telling them only, "I'm gone." She allegedly took some clothes she needed and any physical cash that was hidden in the house, and then simply vanished into the wind. The ex-boyfriend claims that he never spoke to her on the phone or saw her in person ever again. Given the extraordinary decade-long delay in officially discovering Heidi de Schepper's disappearance, the unusual case has generated intense speculation throughout Belgium. Police officials have publicly acknowledged 3 broad scenarios, explicitly stating they are not ruling anything out at this early point in the active investigation. One working theory is that Heidi left intentionally to escape her oppressive circumstances. Supporters of this idea point out that she allegedly took personal items and cash, suggesting a highly voluntary, planned departure. It is conceivable she felt deeply trapped by her supposed addiction, her undeniably troubled relationship, or her highly isolated life, and consciously decided to disappear to start over somewhere new. Her former boyfriend heavily leans toward this specific explanation. He has even speculated publicly that she might be alive and well in another country, frequently suggesting she may have quietly relocated to Spain. There are, however, incredibly serious doubts regarding Heidi having orchestrated a fresh start on her own. She had no known legal income or outside financial support at the time. Crucially, she never again attempted to contact her 3 children. Friends firmly state Heidi was a highly devoted mother, arguing she would never simply abandon her kids without a word. That being said, all investigative reports suggest that these so-called friends were more casual acquaintances than close confidants, and they may not have possessed a great deal of genuine insight into her inner emotional workings. Another possibility explored by police is that Heidi met with some form of tragic, unforeseen incident not directly caused by a third party. Perhaps completely overwhelmed by her alleged substance problem and massive domestic struggles, she may have perished either accidentally or on purpose. If her physical body was never discovered, or perhaps was found in another European country, she may have been quietly registered as a Jane Doe and simply remained undiscovered until this very day. By far the most widely discussed theory, both in mainstream media and on online investigative forums, is that Heidi was the tragic victim of foul play. Given the highly disturbing circumstances of her early life, many individuals have zeroed in entirely on the ex-boyfriend. The glaring fact that he was previously in a legal position of trust and authority as her one-time foster father, and then subsequently entered a sexual relationship with her, is deeply troubling to investigators. On top of that dynamic, his conscious decision not to report her missing, coupled with the convenient way her long absence was actively kept off the government radar, raise incredibly serious suspicions. It has been widely noted by legal experts that he effectively had 14 years to thoroughly cover up any physical evidence if he had harmed Heidi. Some behavioral commentators have accurately noted that the most physically dangerous time in any domestic violence situation is precisely when the victim finally tries to leave the abusive partner. The ex-boyfriend may have completely fabricated the story about an ultimatum regarding her substance use during the 14-year gap. He would logically know that any physical evidence would be incredibly stale by the time authorities finally investigated. It is highly notable that authorities took the aggressive step of legally detaining and thoroughly interrogating him in January 2025 as part of the reactivated official investigation. Ultimately, any of the proposed theories could theoretically hold the truth. It sounds highly plausible that Heidi was kept as a virtual prisoner by her adoptive father turned boyfriend. For obvious psychological reasons, one can clearly see why she would desperately want to escape this highly toxic situations. However, given that she likely wanted to escape, and given that volatile domestic situations tend to reach their violent crescendo during these exact times of separation, it is clear why investigators suspect the ex-boyfriend may have committed a crime. That being said, the distinct possibility of an accidental overdose, or even an intentional, tragic ending, also cannot be simply written off without evidence. Unfortunately, Heidi lived a tragic life characterized by abuse and neglect from the very moment she was born, and the immense weight of the world may have simply crushed her regardless of the specific mechanism. The public continues to wait for a definitive update on this haunting case. On December 8, 2010, a local hunter stumbled upon a startling discovery. He found a human skull hidden deep in a wooded area, located roughly 30 yards off Pecan Valley Road near Highway 12 in Nashville, Tennessee. absolutely no other skeletal remains were found, despite a highly rigorous search of the immediate surrounding area by police. The lone skull was subsequently sent directly to the local medical examiner's office for testing. Because only the skull was physically recovered, the exact cause of death could not be officially determined from the remains. With absolutely no immediate identification available, the unknown man was clinically referred to as the Pecan Valley John Doe in all official case records. Traditional forensic efforts initially failed entirely to identify the skull. Very few details regarding the discovery were publicly released at that specific point in time. However, in 2023, the Metropolitan Nashville Police Department boldly partnered with Othram, a specialized laboratory, to apply advanced DNA testing and forensic genetic genealogy to the cold case. Othram scientists successfully developed a comprehensive, highly accurate DNA profile from the severely degraded remains. They then conducted a massive genealogical search, which successfully pointed investigators toward potential living relatives. Finally, over 14 years after the skull's initial discovery, authorities officially announced that the remains had been conclusively identified through DNA as Marcus Rutledge. Marcus Rutledge was a student at Tennessee State University who disappeared under highly puzzling circumstances in the summer of 1990. He was last formally heard from on June 8, 1998, when he casually spoke with his girlfriend by phone around 1:30 p.m. Later that same evening, she could not physically reach him, and she officially reported him missing after he completely failed to show up as expected. When concerned family and close friends checked Marcus's apartment, they found his pet dog locked securely inside a bathroom. There were several clear indications that Marcus had abruptly left right in the middle of his daily routines. His personal car, a 1995 Plymouth Neon sporting Michigan plates, was also notably missing from his residence. About 3 full weeks later, on June 30th, 1998, Marcus's car was finally located. It was found parked quietly at the Riverwood apartment complex located on Cabot Drive in West Nashville. The recovered vehicle yielded incredibly few clues for detectives. There were absolutely no signs of a violent struggle, nor was there any blood found inside the car that could clearly indicate what had happened. Investigators did, however, find a weapon hidden inside the car. This firearm was believed to possibly belong directly to Marcus. Family members were completely unaware he even owned a weapon, and they found it highly unlikely that he would, given his generally calm personality and demeanor. But oftentimes people change in secret, and they successfully hide certain dangerous elements of their lifestyles from their immediate family. However, his ex-girlfriend specifically noted to police that she wasn't entirely surprised by the discovery. She stated Marcus had allegedly had run-ins and altercations with people in the months before he vanished. Despite extensive local searches and fairly significant local media coverage occurring at the time, absolutely no trace of Marcus was found, and the case predictably went cold. From the very outset, Metro Nashville Police officially considered his sudden disappearance a highly likely slaying. This grim suspicion has only strengthened substantially now that his physical remains have been formally identified. In 2020, a dedicated cold case detective aggressively re-examined Marcus's case file. He quickly uncovered several dark secrets that Marcus had successfully kept hidden from his family. These secrets provided crucial context for possible violent motives. Investigators learned that Marcus was actually no longer actively enrolled in college at the exact time he disappeared. Furthermore, he had become heavily involved in selling small amounts of street cabbage and potentially other illicit substances merely to help make ends meet. It remains a point of deep contention among reviewers how such crucial lifestyle details completely eluded the initial police investigation. Confirming a student's enrollment status should have been a rudimentary step. According to one of the lead cold case detectives, Marcus had actively experienced several physical confrontations in the exact months prior to vanishing. Police now firmly believe his sinister side hustle directly led to his violent disappearance. Another major development that fueled rampant speculation was the brutal slaying of Marcus's best friend and former roommate, a man named Ethan Gibbs. About 8 months exactly after Marcus vanished, in February 1999, Gibbs was executed at his home by a completely unknown assailant. This highly shocking event led detectives working at the time to heavily consider a potential direct connection between Marcus's disappearance and Ethan's slaying, especially since the illicit sales were allegedly a joint venture between the two young men. However, upon a strict comparison of the two cold cases, investigators found absolutely no clear physical evidence linking the two violent incidents. A suspect was eventually charged in Gibbs's case, but the charges were later formally dropped by the state, and that specific event remains totally unsolved. While Marcus Rutledge's legal identity has now been conclusively established by science, many crucial questions about his death remain completely unanswered. The cold case is now being officially treated as an open, active slaying investigation. The Metropolitan Nashville Police Department's cold case unit continues to aggressively pursue new leads. Crucial details, such as the exact manner and time of his violent death, are still completely unknown, largely because only partial remains were recovered from the woods and absolutely no cause of death could be medically determined. While the incredible identification of the Pecan Valley John Doe finally gave some small measure of closure to the grieving family, the much greater mystery now desperately needs to be resolved by authorities. Who exactly ended Marcus, and why? A careful examination of room 2805 at the Oslo Plaza, one of Norway's most exclusive hotels and the second tallest building in the country, reveals a deeply unsettling scene. Taken from the perspective of the hallway, the environment appears to be a fairly standard hotel room after checkout. There is some minor rubbish left on the table by the window. A spare bedspread is rolled up neatly on a chair. The television has been left running in the corner. The bed is disturbed, with the sheets loosely pulled back. But something feels unmistakably wrong about the setting, and upon closer forensic inspection, it becomes clear that the occupant never actually checked out at all. The guest staying in room 2805 was listed on the hotel register as Jennifer Fairgate. Staff members remembered her appearing highly elegant and consistently well-dressed during her brief stay. She originally checked into the hotel on the evening of May 31st, 1995. One of the receptionists working that specific night distinctly remembers her checking in completely alone. Conversely, another staff member insists that she was accompanied by a dark-haired man. In either case, she deliberately listed a second guest on her booking form, a Louis Fairgate, and as such, she was actively given 2 electronic key cards by the front desk. According to the building's digital door lock system, over the course of the next 3 days, Jennifer used her electronic key only 5 times. She used it at 10:44 p.m. on May 31st, immediately after she initially checked in. Then again at 12 a.m. on June 1st. Next at 8 a.m. on June 1st, then at 8 a.m. on June 2nd, and finally at 11 a.m. on June 2nd. The timeline generated by this data presents a very peculiar gap. Hotel housekeeping officially entered her room at 12:44 p.m. on June 1st and officially noted that Jennifer wasn't present. Because the digital system only logged when guests actually entered their room, not when they exited, it means that at some point between 8 a.m. and 12:44 p.m. that day, Jennifer exited her room and did not return until 8 a.m. the following morning. Where she went, or what she did, during that massive 20 to 24-hour period remains completely unknown. Later during her stay, the reception desk sent an automated message to Jennifer's television system asking her to come down to the lobby and settle her mounting pay-per-view bill. The digital message was acknowledged by a remote control pressing OK. This meant that someone was physically inside the room to see it. That exact same evening, the landline phone in her room was used to dial 2 completely non-existent phone numbers. By June 3rd, Jennifer still hadn't come down to the reception desk to settle her final bill. Furthermore, the electronic data log showed that she hadn't used her keycard to enter the room for almost 33 hours. Unless someone else was already inside the room to manually open the door for her, that meant that she hadn't left her room during all of that time. A hotel security guard was subsequently sent upstairs to check on Jennifer at around 7:50 p.m. that evening. Upon arriving at her door, he was met by a hanging "Do Not Disturb" sign. Ignoring the warning, he knocked sharply on her door. Almost immediately after his knuckles struck the wood, he heard a loud gunshot ring out from within the room. The guard quickly withdrew down the hallway to seek assistance, unfortunately leaving the active scene unattended. When he and other staff members finally returned, roughly 15 minutes later, they found that the heavy door was locked securely from the inside. After forcibly breaching the entry, they found Jennifer lying motionless on the large bed, with her legs dangling awkwardly over the edge, her feet lightly touching the floor. She had been shot directly in the center of the forehead while lying flat on her back. A 9mm Browning pistol was found resting in her right hand, positioned very gently across her chest. Her finger was still resting firmly against the trigger mechanism. 7 more live rounds were still loaded in the weapon's magazine. Curiously, she held the gun in a highly unusual reverse grip, meaning her fingers were wrapped tightly around the back of the grip, with her thumb utilized to depress the trigger. Beneath her head, investigators quickly located a pillow with a second .8 bullet hole fired completely through it. When police officers went to formally confirm the decedent's identity, they discovered a bizarre reality. Jennifer Fairgate simply didn't exist. The name was entirely an alias, one which she had suspiciously spelled 2 different ways on the hotel registration form. The Belgian home address, which she had provided when she checked in, was proven to be entirely false. The corporate company she supposedly worked for did not exist in any business registry. Every single attempt by detectives to trace Jennifer's real identity led to an absolute dead end. As a result, detectives immediately turned their attention to her registered guest, Louis Fairgate. But nobody could find a trace of him anywhere. Indeed, nobody was certain whether he had ever actually arrived at the hotel, or if he even existed as a real person. As forensic investigators began examining room 2805 more closely, the small details started to raise massive questions. They found no handbag in the suite, no driver's license, no passport, no house keys, no currency. There was absolutely nothing with which they could legally identify Jennifer. She appeared impeccably well presented, having apparently applied fresh makeup shortly before her death. Yet there were no toiletries or cosmetics found anywhere among her belongings in the bathroom. The only personal toiletry item recovered from the scene was a single bottle of men's aftershaves. For someone who had supposedly checked into a luxury hotel for multiple days, she had brought a remarkably small amount of luggage with her. Her clothing presented an equally unusual puzzle. It was all highly stylish, manufactured with great quality, but almost every single brand label had been carefully removed from the garments. The tags were not hastily torn out, they were cut out cleanly, completely stitch by stitch, as if done deliberately and methodically to prevent the clothing from ever being traced back to a specific retailer. Only one single label remained intact on her blazer, which simply read, René Lazard, a known German fashion house. Bizarrely, absolutely no clothing for the lower half of her body was found in the room, besides what Jennifer was already wearing at the time of her death. There were no extra skirts, leggings, trousers, or even spare underwear. Curiously, a pair of distinctive, colorful shoes, which a hotel maid had explicitly noticed while cleaning the room on June 1st, were notably missing from the crime scene entirely. The recovered firearm also presented massive problems for the investigation. Its unique serial number had been professionally etched away utilizing harsh acid, making it completely impossible to trace back to a manufacturer or purchaser. Near the bed, investigators found a small attaché case containing 25 additional rounds of 9mm ammunition and absolutely nothing else. But perhaps the most profoundly unsettling piece of physical evidence was a simple plastic bag containing a crisp copy of USA Today. The plastic bag was clearly marked in ink with the room number 2816. All of the other hotel guests staying on Jennifer's floor had since been formally identified and cleared by police, and all except for one. The specific guest registered in room 2816. His or her true identity remains a complete mystery to this day, though the room was most certainly occupied during the time frame in question. The guest staying in the directly adjacent suite reported hearing heavy thudding noises coming through the wall from 2816 in the early morning hours of June 3rd. A partial fingerprint found on that plastic bag was carefully analyzed by forensics. It did not belong to Jennifer, nor did it trigger a match to anyone listed on any international criminal database. The deeply suspicious circumstances surrounding Jennifer's case have left seasoned investigators and amateur internet sleuths scratching their heads for decades. One working possibility is that Jennifer was simply a highly private individual who went to extreme, calculated lengths to end her own life on her own strict terms. This specific possibility is strongly supported by the physical fact that her door was found double-locked from the inside and that a preliminary test shot had seemingly been fired into the pillow below her head. However, forensic experts found it incredibly striking that despite the vast amount of blood spatter found on the walls, ceiling, and even the gun's muzzle, there was not a single drop of blood located on Jennifer's actual hands. Furthermore, there was an absolute absence of gunshot residue or powder singeing on her skin. Many analysts have repeatedly questioned whether someone else may have executed Jennifer and then deliberately fired a second test shot into the pillow as a methodical way to stage the scene, forcibly wrapping her hand around the weapon to make her finger more firmly grip the trigger. The calculated use of aliases, the meticulous removal of clothing labels, and the total absence of any traceable personal items have led some to firmly speculate that Jennifer was deeply involved in the dangerous world of international espionage. Other hotel guests specifically noted that she spoke both English and French flawlessly, with no discernible regional accent. This specific linguistic skill is highly consistent with intelligence work, though bilingualism is undeniably common throughout Europe. Notably, she wore a Citizen Aqualand upon her wrist, a bulky, highly expensive tactical dive watch frequently associated with military operators. As posited by various television documentaries, could this event have actually been a covert job gone horribly wrong? Could Jennifer have been operating in a fragile, temporary alliance with whoever was staying secretly down the hall in room 2816? Could that adjacent room be exactly where she actually stayed for the mysteriously missing 20 to 24 hours? And finally, there are those theorists who firmly think that her fake alias, elegant attire, and bizarre overnight absence from the hotel strongly suggest that Jennifer was operating as a high-end escort. If that scenario is the case, it is highly possible a violent client, or perhaps a controlling handler, was directly responsible for whatever happened to her in that room. Then, like many vulnerable individuals working in that specific line of work, she may have been deeply estranged from her biological family. This would perfectly explain why nobody ever filed a missing persons report or actively came looking for her after 1995. In 2016, Jennifer's body was officially exhumed from its unmarked grave so that modern forensic DNA testing could be applied to her remains. The subsequent analysis indicated that she was highly likely of East German origin and was approximately 24 years of age at the exact time of her death. Still, even with this new data, no missing persons reports could be definitively linked to her profile. No estranged family members ever came forward to claim her, and no confirmed identity was ever established by authorities. And so, 31 years on, room 2805 and its strange contents remain the only concrete clues investigators possess to work with. The enduring fascination with this case is partly due to a highly detailed digital reconstruction hosted online. A three-dimensional model created by a Norwegian publication allows users to explore room 2805 exactly as responders found it. The interactive space places users inside the eerie, almost clinical environment frozen perfectly in time, documenting a woman who arrived with absolutely no past and left behind nothing to explain why she had come to the Plaza Hotel or why she violently died there.